Hey YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. Welcome to my review for King-ohger episode 22, I believe it is, the episode following a clip show. And oddly enough, it's almost like a two-parter, and kind of weird in retrospect that a clip show led us into such a big episode. As this episode picks up where we left off with our monster of the week, who's like, I guess, a shoe god hunter, attacking, and he deals some heavy damage at the beginning of the episode. As at the very start, he actually consumes the souls of the three shoe gods and becomes even more powerful, and he leaves a devastating blow to Shugoddam. And this is kind of an episode about how Gira is going to function as a leader and dealing with having to deal with these huge situations like this damage. And of course, we have our favorite, absolute best character in the history of Tokusatsu immediately, of course, turning on Gira again and be like, I can't believe you're not going to do this, at least Rackley's protected us. It's like, God, he's the worst. I hate him even more than like Gira's overacting. It's just the absolute worst. But it creates this interesting, like, immediate crisis for him to have to deal with. In a way, I kind of wish they would have waited a little bit, maybe had a couple episodes sitting on the status quo before he immediately had to deal with something so big. But admittedly, it's pretty dramatic that he has to immediately deal with such a heavy situation and figure out how to deal with it. And there's a bit of a debate that comes up in regards to, they fight off the monster in mecha form, and they retreat, and Yanma's mad at him, and he's like, oh, but the shoe gods were scared, and he's like, doesn't matter, they're replaceable. They're like AI, which I find funny. Like, the AI stories like this coming up now is funnier, just because, like, we have legitimate debates now about AI, which reminds me of 0-1 and stuff like that. Like, that arc in 0-1 about proving that human gears are better than humans would not be so well today. Bottom line is, they are replaceable. They're not real, they're artificial. It's in the name. Artificial intelligence. Regardless, there's a little bit of a debate there about that, but it does lead to some development later where Yanma like talks to the shoe gods, and he's like, or the mecha, and he's like, I know that you're learning because you're AI or whatever, and you've been learning from Gira, so like learn to pick yourselves up. And it's like a nice moment and stuff like that in regards to Yanma and Gira's relationship and his development and all that stuff, but that's kind of what that leads towards. But it's also a lot about setting up the arc for the castle mecha, which I'm glad it didn't debut in this episode. I mean, I guess I knew it didn't just because based off of the toy schedule and stuff like that, but part of me was like worried in the back of my head that they were going to debut it, and it was going to be one of those episodes where it's like, oh, our mecha are out of commission, so we gotta use this new one or whatever. And I'm glad that didn't happen. Obviously, again, I sort of knew it, but just pretending I didn't know, I'm glad they waited on it. I still almost wish there was a little bit more breathing room between the arcs of debuting things, but this is a pretty decent build up to it. Not to mention the Secrets of Rackley stuff built up to it. My episode review for the last episode of the Secrets of Rackley should be out before that, but they sort of teed that up a little bit there. So there has been a decent amount of build up there to it, which I really like, and I like the mythology and all that. And this episode also has another one of those moments, which is a pretty reoccurring thing of them recreating legends of the past as they talk about the old legend of the old king uniting all the shoe gods in this final attack that Gira does. And this is like, what, the second or third time they've drawn a parallel to the modern day Rangers doing something that the past ones did, which I think obviously is intentional. I'm curious if that's going to lead to something bigger at the end about these like 5, 6 being the sort of second coming of the old legend. And obviously they kind of are because they've been replicating all these things that have happened, but I'd still be curious to see if that has anything more done with it other than just kind of showcasing that it's happening for the sake of like paralleling the murals or whatever. But yeah, it was a really good and intense episode, honestly. Like, there was so much intense stuff happening at the beginning with the huge damage and stuff like that, and Gira having to deal with immediately the responsibility of becoming a leader and sort of figuring out like how he can make the best decisions possible, and sort of the balance between like, oh, I gotta protect the shoe gods, but I also gotta protect the people. There is also briefly a mention, which I honestly can't remember what the significance of it was, and I think it was in part just that he could go out there and fight, but showcasing that Kuwagata didn't have a soul. I'm like, yeah, it's a robot, but like it didn't have one of those like little soul gems, and I think the significance of that was that he wasn't afraid to fight, but I'm not entirely sure if that's going to lead to something later either. But either way, also something else I liked in this episode was they reveal that the Black Ranger, like, part of the reason he brought the javelin or the lance to him last week was like he was trying to activate the castle himself and he couldn't, and kind of guessed like, oh, you probably need one of the royal family. And I liked that because that moment, while it was nice, felt a little repetitive to when he first joined the team, but I like that they're keeping his character within it. Like, even though I'm glad everyone's working together and they aren't dragging certain elements out, even though he sometimes annoys me, I'm glad they're keeping that aspect of his character, because it's an aspect that can be annoying, but I also respect it and it sets him apart. But overall, this was a really strong episode with a lot of intense action. Really good job at moving the story forward. A good job at moving the story forward for this mecha debut, which, while I still wish there was a little bit more breathing room, I'm glad that they're still taking their time with it for the most part. That's mainly a nitpick. I am hoping after this we get to sit with the status quo a little bit more before we do major shakeups or anything like that, but still an overall strong episode, 4 out of 5. Just at the end here, though, I really want to reiterate, though, that I hope that we have more for Jeremy. I really am disappointed at how much he's kind of just melded into the background and how much of his story potential has been wasted, and he's become like so many other Six Rangers where he just falls to the background, and I really hope that fixes itself. But that's about it for this one, guys. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.